Hi, my name is Shola Ajani, School of Consulting, where we provide learning and development for progressive development. Our learning is largely focused on application, how you can use our learning, um, and anecdotal, theoretical, but very practical in application. And that's what we aim to achieve. So yes, I'm Shola Jani, chairman and founder of the School of Consulting, which was founded in 2019 after 25 plus years consulting globally in Africa, in Europe, and in North America. A brief profile there. I've trained for the Office of Deputy Prime Minister in the UK. I've been featured on CNN on Nigeria Jobs. I've been a host of the Human Capital Summit in Africa, founder of Nigeria Jobs Online, arguably the very first online recruitment portal in Nigeria. We established the first multi-city recruitment tour that took us 30 days across America recruiting for African companies. We have also organized recruitment exhibitions globally. A short profile there. Our training programs cover HR, project management skills, leadership skills, social media and digital skills, consulting tools, and templates. Every Monday, we offer free training on a topic, and we also have the paid sessions. So these are the courses that we cover for HR practice and consulting. It includes recruitment and selection, how to recruit, how to interview, how to carry out job interviews, new managers training, how to conduct or carry out or organize, or even it starts from designing actually, how to design a performance appraisal. Compensation and benefits, how to do pay scales, grades, and the benefits to staff, how to organize training, salary structure, organogram, the organizational structure in a company, trainings analysis, HR audits, and administration, as well as train the trainer. We also have courses that we teach that could enhance a consultant. For instance, we have HR consultant, by the way, we have training that covers job design and evaluation, how to conduct pay harmonization, setting up payroll, HR transformation, developing HR strategy, and HR interventions in several areas, as well as policy development in HR. These are some of the courses that we offer. Under project management courses, we focus largely on project management reporting, the tools you need for project management reports. And these are the list of courses that we look at. How to put together a business case for projects, building a project team, project documentation, and then the project risk register. How do you manage risk and how do you report it? Project update reporting, project planning and control, managing risk in project, I think we mentioned that earlier, project communications, managing projects generally, and project change control. For management skills training, I love to call this promotion must have skills. Skills you must have if you're seeking or desirous of getting promoted at work. It's sacrosanct. These courses or this knowledge or these capabilities you must possess if you seek to grow within an organization. Conversely, I say to anyone who is struggling to grow within an organization, do your skills check. If you possess anything less than 50-60% of these specific courses, that might be the reason why you're struggling to get promoted. So these are management skills that will prepare you for leadership. Prepare you for leadership. Management skills that will prepare you for leadership. I omitted one slide, but that slide is focusing on digital skills, social media digital skills, pardon me. And then for leadership skills, crafting and selling a vision, how to put together a business strategy, understanding your leadership styles so that you know how you relate with your staff or people. For leadership development, we have leading difficult people, how to lead difficult people, including having difficult conversations, change, managing change, planning, board management, and developing and managing people. Those are the courses that we have altogether. We have done a few free training. We've done the capability gap assessment, a way of assessing the gap between what an organization is presently doing and what they're capable of achieving. So we've done that training. We have also done the business diagnostic template, whereby you use it as a way of troubleshooting and finding out where a company can improve their performances. If you need the materials, please ask us. We'll be happy to provide the materials. Likewise, we've done training on Calendly, a very powerful tool for those who are in business. We've done Calendly. We've done ranking and ideation. Ranking ideation is a tool that allows you not only to generate ideas for a client or a business or solutions, generate solutions, but much more importantly, to score each solution. So if you're making a proposal to someone on the basis, on the strength of your scoring, such a person can make informed decisions with respect to their choices. So solution ideation and ranking allows you to come up with options. Beyond that, each option is given a score, and it's quite very, very useful. Allows your clients or whoever needs to make a decision to make informed decisions based on the comparative analysis that you can come up with. That is that. And the free training on HR, which we're going to dive into now. Yes, we're going to dive into that now. So pardon me as I get the slides up. Yeah. Okay, so what is HR? HR is basically human resource management. It has gone through transition and transformation over the years, from personnel management to people management to human resource management. Increasingly, people are now calling it human capital management. Basically, same emphasis, but much more increasingly, we're seeing people as capital, as assets for an organization. And so you get to hear a lot about HR being called human capital management and or human resource management. So what is HR? HR is defining the people side of business, managing the people side of the business. The why are we doing what we're doing? Who do we need? What do they need to do? Where do we find them? How do we find them? That's essentially the major role of HR. So HR does not operate in isolation. HR responds to business needs. HR never operates in isolation. It's in response to the business needs, where the business is going. So the business needs are translated to the CEO, who communicates this to the HR director. And that's the flow, functional flow, as it were. Here we have a typical HR department whereby at the top there is the HR director. And depending on the organization, you could have the next line in the structure, the HR manager could be split into two. And a HR manager focusing on resources and another focusing on training. And then you could have a third HR manager acting as the HR business partner. They all have different responsibilities and different roles. But you tend to get this in large organizations. In most typical HR departments, you have a single HR director and more or less one person who acts as the HR manager who does everything in HR. And then you now have HR officers or HR officers who are responsible for different roles in HR: recruitment, training, payroll, admin. So this is a typical structure, but again, it can get more complex than this depending on how big the organization is. Now, HR devolves its tasks from the business goal. HR devolves its tasks from the business goal, where the business is going. HR does not act in isolation. So let's always remember that. For example, the business vision or the business goal is to expand into Africa, like the example we're going to look at very briefly. I once had some work to do with UBA, one of the banks in Nigeria, had a vision to expand into Africa. So that can be said to be the business goal. So HR has to go away and fulfill the people side of this vision. And before you can fulfill the people side of this vision, there are a lot of things HR has to look at. The cultural implication of having to work across several countries, the people needs, the kind of people that you need, the skills requirements might differ from country to country. Working conditions obviously will differ. The business processes, HR processes, massive structural changes that HR has to manage, and so HR is not just so about recruiting people and managing people. It's about interpreting the vision of the business, doing an analysis of the impact of every business decision, and coming up with plans, basically to translate the business goals to actionable plans. So the HR director takes hold of that vision and breaks it down. This is what we want to achieve. Translates these business goals into actions, actionable actions, into plans. And this could be done in partnership with the HR manager, who breaks the action plans into steps, activities, and tasks, reporting back to the HR director for approval. Once that has been signed off, has been approved, then the HR officers are largely responsible for carrying out their activities with the help of HR assistants and HR admin, again, reporting back to the HR manager. So this is the reporting structure. The HR director translates the business goal into plans. The HR man and is handed to the HR manager, who breaks the actionable action plans into steps and activities and tasks. Individual tasks that's going to be carried out by the HR officer and HR admin. So there's a feedback mechanism in there. HR director instructs the HR manager. The HR manager does what he needs to do and reports back to the HR director. And once that's signed off, it comes to the HR officer for implementation in most cases, and the HR officer reports to the HR manager, not to the HR director. So they both report to the HR manager. In some instances, you have the HR assistant reporting to the HR officer. It's not unusual to have the HR assistant and the HR officer both reporting to the HR manager. So one of the key things in HR is managing the employee life cycle. The employee life cycle. The life cycle is the entire pattern of someone that comes to an organization, engaging them, and then they leave the organization. The life cycle. The life cycle is, a child is born, grows up to become a small boy, a girl, goes to school, goes for education, gets married, bears children, and then, at a good ripe old age, dies. So that's the life cycle. So likewise for employees too have a life cycle. And this is the life cycle. And this life cycle is very, very important because each function in HR devolves from this life cycle. Each of the HR functions devolves from this life cycle. And this life cycle can be independent of the other, even though they are linked. For instance, when you recruit somebody, there's a recruitment process. Beyond the recruitment process, you need to pay them, and that's compensation. You need to give them benefits. So after recruitment, there's compensation and benefits. In fact, before recruitment, there are a few things that you need to do. We'll look at that in a minute. So beyond recruitment, there's compensation, and then you engage them, employee engagement. You appraise them. There's no point in giving somebody a job to do and you don't set goals, you don't set targets. And when you do, you need to be able to measure, are they meeting with the goals? And if they're not, or even if they are and they need to improve, you need to develop them further. Part of the engagement is the appraisal and development. Engagement is to basically find out what they want, what they would love, and how well they're doing, how well are they being supported in the work in which they're doing. Employee engagement and motivation, so it's not a one-way stream. So you employ someone, you don't just leave them to their devices, you engage them to find out how they're doing, what are the things you could do better, and that distills into appraisals, developing them in training, coaching, mentoring, and if they meet their appraisal targets or specific targets, there are rewards in the organization. And if they leave, how do you manage that? Another thing about here is leadership development. You have a talent pipeline under your succession plan that leads to recruitment into existing roles or new roles. So when we have recruitment, it may well be someone has left, it's a new job, somebody succeeds somebody in that role, or it's a new job they're moving into. So each of these 7 functions in HR has its own narrative and study of that. So you could actually focus on HR recruitment. You could focus on HR compensation and benefits. You could focus on engagement, HR engagement, employee engagement, performance appraisal. Development is learning. They look at HR rewards, and then leadership development in HR. So each of these can be a standalone functionality within HR. Now, this is the recruitment process. And what I want to show here is the relationship between everyone in the HR department and the different aspects in the recruitment process. Now, the very first thing that we do before we recruit is to design a job. It could be an existing job or it could be a new job. Once the job has been designed, then we can recruit or we can find someone to fill that job. Who does the job design? And it's always between the HR director and the HR manager. And occasionally, if the capacity to design the job is not there, you can call in an HR consultant to design the job, to create the job and to design it, evaluate the job. So design a job is what will the person do, the job description, the definitions, the requirements for the role, the deliverables for the role, the qualifications for the roles, the experience, the pay, and all of that. So that comes under job design. At times you have job design and evaluation. That comes under job design. That could be done in-house or it could be done by the consultant. And typically, it's always key responsibility of the HR manager and the HR director. Once the job has been designed, the next thing is to fill the job, and that is recruitment. And largely, is a function that is carried out between the HR manager and the HR officers, the HR manager and the rest of the department. The HR director hardly really gets involved in recruitment, unless when it comes to getting sign-ups or approvals or interviews. They hardly get involved in the task. Their involvement is always at the highest level in designing the job, agreeing vacancies to be filled, and all of that. Strategy for recruitment, for talent management, filling vacancies to ensure that the company is not at the point where they can't fill vacancies. So at the strategic level, the HR director does that. But in terms of the practical implementation, as you saw from the chat earlier, it is largely the HR manager driving that. So the recruitment process, we've designed the job. You need to find someone. The recruitment process of advertising or recruiting internally, or secondly, somebody from the department. These are things that are largely done by between the HR officer and the HR manager. So they do that in tandem. After the advertising, after the recruitment, then the next step is shortlisting. How do we shortlist? How do it could be automatic shortlisting, it could be manual shortlisting. As a matter of fact, organizations are moving more towards automatic shortlisting, especially when you have large number of vacancies and you want to be consistent and objective. Manual shortlisting may not be objective, and you want to be fair to everyone. So there's what we call the automatic tracking and selection that could be used for your shortlisting. And once you've done that, you want to assess. Again, this is largely driven by the HR officer and the HR manager. You want to assess. Assessment, when you carry out interviews, those are assessments. When you carry out jobs assessment centers, doing interviews, doing role plays, doing presentation, doing tests, even interviews are all assessments. So all of that is, again, it can be learned in terms of how do we set up an assessment and how do you run an assessment, a job assessment. Beyond the job assessment, you've agreed on a particular candidate, there's a job offer. Job offers are typically done by the HR officer, communicates the job offer to the candidate, and then once that is accepted, there's onboarding the candidate. How do you onboard? Most times the onboarding is done by the HR assistant. So, I mean, this is the recruitment process, and one of the key things you're going to take away from our training is who does what, and what are the opportunities that exist, having learned how to recruit someone into an organization. The next major step is compensation and benefits. Compensation is what you pay people. Benefits are the additional benefits that you can add to the role or to the function. But in the practical sense, compensation is ensuring that Mercy, assuming we just recruit Mercy is given the right salary and the right benefit entitlements. And so a lot of work in compensation as benefit is with finance, the payroll department. So HR needs to inform the payroll departments of additions and deductions. What are the entitlements? Leave pay, holiday pay, loans that are outstanding. And so once all of that has been added or deducted, the final pay goes to Mercy. So this is a major function of HR admin and HR officer and the HR officer. Beyond that, you want to manage the staff in capturing the skills, the qualifications, arranging professional development, experience, and competencies. These are stored in the system. There are a lot of software now. Once you recruit and you sort out the salary, the next step is talent management. You want to capture all their details, basically capturing their resume, their CV, if you as it were, on the system. So this is a major function of talent management, identifying what people can do, the skills, the qualifications, and all of that is captured into the system so that they can identify opportunities. So again, we look into that. And the next thing is performance management. How do you manage people's performance? How do you set targets? How do you set performance targets? And how do you measure them? And how do you appraise? And beyond the appraisal, how do you reward? So at the beginning of the year, specific targets are set. And if people attain those targets, they need to be rewarded. So what are the rewards? So you need to have a performance management system in place. Each of these roles can be individual roles or collective roles. Increasingly, we are seeing specialists, people working in specialist areas in all of this. The next major thing is learning and development. So after the appraisal and after the evaluation, there needs to be skills development. And one thing I like to say here is learning and development, even though they are used interchangeably, they are different. They mean different things. Learning focuses on the training, the coaching, the mentoring that you organize for staff so that they can do their existing jobs very well, so they can succeed very well doing what they are recruited to do now. Development are learning opportunities that they might be engaged in that will help them to take advantage of future opportunities. Okay, so learning is to help the employee perform well on the job now Developments are training that will give them the capacity to apply for future roles, capacity to grow. Say, for instance, somebody is an HR officer. The training you're sending them on is learning is basically training to help them perform the role of HR officer. Developments are training you send them on to be able to do the work of HR manager. So that's the difference between learning and development. People use it interchangeably, but they are quite different. And then there's succession planning, not just for vacancies, but for leadership development. How do you create a talent pipeline? You don't want an organization whereby you can't predict what the turnover is. You need to be able to predict the turnover, employee turnover, even though you're trying to reduce it. But yes, in as much as you try to reduce it, there will always be employee turnover. So how do you create a talent pipeline, the people pipeline, so that when people leave, there are people in the organization or that you are in the process of recruiting or possibly recruit when the opportunity arises. But much more is about leadership development. How do you identify people in the organization who have the opportunity to rise, who have the opportunity to become leaders? So succession planning is about leadership development as well, about developing leadership potentials within an organization. Another major area in HR is HR analytics. All the things we'll be talking about, recruiting, employee turnover, trends, learning and development, how are people performing, compensation analysis, comparatives, how well are we doing? All of this will come under HR analytics. And you need to report. All of this needs to be reported in terms of information and data. And this can be used, if it's well managed, it can be used to predict trends, to predict patterns, and then it can dovetail into decision making within any organization. So HR analytics is a major area that is gaining increasing prominence. Okay. As far as HR strategy is concerned, we've listed 10 different strategies here, and strategy is at the highest level. And for someone that's looking at consulting, you need to be focusing on developing on how to develop HR strategies. So our training focuses on HR practice and HR consulting. For the HR consulting, is largely about developing strategies and helping HR departments to achieve their business goals. So, for example, if you're going to be doing anything on compensation planning, it's about answering the question: are we paying well? Are we paying well to stay competitive in the organization? In fact, beyond pay is payment and pay and benefits. I've had instances of where people rather work for a company that pays less but has fantastic benefits. So these are things you could do as a consultant for an organization. And remember, the thing about consulting is this: you can take a step back from the day-to-day activities and you're not involved in the business. And then you can offer independent and sincere, honest advice, impartial advice. So if you're putting together a compensation plan, you're going to look at the entire industry. Because of the nature of your job, a HR director might not be able to know what other organizations are doing. But because you're not involved in this particular organization, you have an overview of what's happening in the organization. As a consultant, you're in a better place to have that overarching view, looking at organizations, making comparative analysis, and letting clients know that you've got to be competitive. Otherwise, if you're not doing this, you're not competitive. So that's what the consultant does. And so you're coming up with compensation plan, a compensation strategy. You can come up with a recruitment strategy. How do we find people? How do we find the people that work for us? The reasons why companies use a consultant is so that the company, the HR director, HR managers, they can focus on the business, the day-to-day business, look at the day-to-day task. But the consultant is much more strategic, looking at where the organization is going, putting plans in place, and then allowing the HR department to basically implement that. Employee development, how do we develop our people? Job design evaluation, how do we engage our people? Succession planning, leadership development. I did some work for an oil and gas company about 10, 11 years ago now. They were looking at the new generation of, um, of, of employees, and it was called the high potential leadership training. I'm smiling because some of those that went through the high potential leadership training are now senior managers and directors within the organization. So it was a good thing that they identified those set of staff who had the potential to become leaders, and that was something that we did as a consultant. Employee retention, how do we keep our people? I mean, it's very hard to keep employees nowadays. What sort of things can we have in place? What sort of plan? What sort of strategy? And what sort of things can we implement to make sure that we keep our people? Employee wellness packages, employee relations, and even putting together a strategic roadmap for HR. Those are some of the things that opportunities that are there for consultants. So for HR strategy, you're looking at asking 7 questions. For strategy generally, you're trying to answer 7 questions when you're looking at developing a strategy. Even if it's for HR or developing strategy generally, you're looking at answering 7 questions. And the first question ideally is, where are we going? Where are we going may relate to the vision. What is the vision? Where are we going? And we're going somewhere. This is where we're going. Then number 2, why are we going there? Why are we going there? The why is increasingly very, very important. In the past, it was about, this is where we're going, take it or leave it. But organizations are beginning to realize that selling the why gets a lot of buy-in. And when people buy into a vision, they take ownership of that vision. So where you have your staff taking over your vision, they actually take over the vision and they're a lot more productive, as opposed to they're just doing it because they told us this is what to do. So the what is, this is what we're doing. The why is, this is why we're doing it. And it's increasingly important to talk about the why, so that buying and ownership is higher. Because where there is high buying and ownership, the productivity is correspondingly higher. So this is where we're going. This is why we're going there. But having defined where we're going, that's the vision, and the rationale why we're going there, where are we now? So in strategic development, those 3 questions are very, very key. This is where we're going, that's the vision. Why are we going there? That's the rationale. But where are we now is a critical assessment of where you are vis-a-vis where you're going. So you are able to identify the gap between where you want to be, or where you ought to be, or where you want to go, and where you are now. And it is that gap that you need to fill. So in HR, this is where we're going. Why are we going there? So in the example we saw earlier, we're moving into Africa. Why are we moving into Africa? You sell the vision. Don't just tell people we are moving into Africa. So we're going into Africa. That's where we're going. Why are we going there? We're going there because that's the next growth phase of the business, so that we remain competitive. Then where are we now? We are only in Nigeria. So what do we do to get to Africa? So what do we do to bridge the gap between where we are going and where we are now? We need people, we need skills, we need abilities, we need capabilities. Then the next question is, how do we get there? That becomes the plan. That becomes the plan, the strategy. And as we teach, when we teach strategy, a strategy without execution or implementation is just a plan. It's a dream, it's a wish. So strategy is not just about planning and saying this is what we want to do. It's much more about implementing it. So how do we get there? That's a plan. How do we know we're there? Those are the measurements. When do we know we're there? That's the targets. So for every strategy, there are plans, there are measurements, there are targets, there are initiatives, practical things you need to do to achieve the objective of the plan. So the case study I'm talking about is basically UBA. UBA had a vision of becoming a Pan-African bank. And the first thing the HR department had to do was to look at the HR issues that surrounds that vision. The culture issue, the language issue, qualifications, practices, even the law between one country and the other in Africa vary. And this is a change. How do we manage this change? We manage it as a project. So basically, when we talk about strategic planning, there are essentially three things. Where we are now and where we're going. And the third leg is, how do we get there? So it's basically, where are we now? Or you can start from the vision. This is where we're going. But where are we now? How do we get there? Okay, how do we get there? So the plan here is a transition between where we are and where we're going. It's a process of transiting from now to the goal. That's the plan, most often called the strategy. So one of the key things, this is an example I'm going to go through now. One of the key things we had to do for UBA then was to carry out a skills audit of all the HR staff. Remember, we're going to Africa. UBA was going to Africa. And one of the key things they had to do was to assess the current staff against a set of minimum standards that will be required for operations in Africa. Okay, so we had to assess all the staff against a set of minimum standards. So the thing about this HR audit is you assess like for like. Don't assess an HR officer and an HR manager. You assess people on the same grade. And it's only how you can be fair. There's no point in assessing somebody who is an HR officer and someone who's an HR manager in the same assessment. That would not be fair. So in this case, we're assessing 3 HR staff, for example. And one of the key things we do is there are minimum standards they must have in the assessment. So the first assessment point here is degree and qualification. And for every of the dimensions of the assessment, there's a point, there is score that you award if you meet the minimum requirements. And so we have to do this for every staff. And the results were fairly objective because you use the same parameter and standard for everyone. It's not punitive, it's to know what are the gaps. Remember, we're going to Africa. We need to look at the people that we have, look at the skills that they need, and if they have those skills, how do we help them get those skills? So that's the whole idea of the skills audit. So, so the very first thing that we did was the degree or qualification. And the minimum standard is a BSc or HND. And if you have a BSc or HND, you score 5 points. And that's it there. John Ade has a BSc, he scores the 5 points. Professional qualifications. The CIPM for Nigeria and then the international one, SHARM. If you have either of the two, you score the 5 points. If you don't have, you score 0. In this case, John has neither. Can you see existing capability of the staff has neither, and that is 0. Yeah. Languages. If you can speak one language is 1 point. If you can speak 2 languages, 3 points. If you can speak 3 or more languages, 5 points. John can speak English. Sorry, the minimum standard is English and French, which is 2. If you can speak 2, that's 3 points. But you can only speak English. You can see John can only speak English. For one language, that's 1 point. He scores 1 point. Number of years experience, the minimum for this grade should be 3 years. John has 3 years experience, he scores 3 because again, your grading criteria. If he has 3 years experience, he scores 5 points. Less than 3 years, he scores 3 points. So because he has 2 years, he scores 3 points. Professional development, you must have 30 points. John has done his professional 30 point development. He has completed it. He has a full 30 points, he scores 5. Does John have international experience? Yes is 5 points, no is 0 points. John has 2 years international experience, that is yes, he scores his 5 points. And then so on and so forth. Now we do that for John, and so John scores 24. But remember this, beyond the score, the next column here is what is the action plan? You must have an action plan. You don't just do an audit, get the result of the gap, and then have no action. You must have an action plan. So that's for John. We do the same thing for Mary Blessing. Mary Blessing scores 30 points. Okay. And then we did now for another guy, Aruna Ilerica. Let's assume these are the 3 staff. You now compare all the 3. You compare all the 3 in their score. Yeah. So Mary has the highest score here. That means she met all the minimum requirements. There's no action plan. There's no requirement needed. Mary is the only one in this department out of these 3 staff that meets the minimum requirement for staffing capabilities for working the new, maybe another country in Africa. Yeah. John Ade doesn't meet the requirement because of languages. And so what do? We put together an action plan to help John meet the minimum requirements, maybe his languages. Aruna scored 27. It meets minimum requirements. No requirement is needed. And guess what? Sorry, there should be no action plan there. It passes with the minimum requirements. Is available to be posted as part of the new operations in these new countries. So what are the intervention plans? So you remember we said you must have intervention plans. So you have different intervention plans and how it's going to be implemented, who owns it? Is it the HR director? Is it the HR manager? Is it the consultant? Who owns it? So this becomes a plan, translating the vision into action plan. So the reason, the usefulness of the skills assessment is basically to capture the skills that we have right now. We want to go into Europe. Sorry, we want to go into Africa. But we can't just launch into Africa. Africa is our goal, is our vision. Remember the 7 steps. This is where we are going. Why are we going there? Step 2. Step 3 is where are we going? Sorry, step 1 is where are we going? Step 2 is why are we going there? And then step 3 is trying to capture where we are right now. And then step 4, what are the gaps between where we are going and where we are? And this is one of the outcomes. Yeah, you carry out these audits. You get an assessment of skills, assessment of competency. What are the training that you need? What are the qualifications? Who can you post? Who needs support? What does the organization need? So you can have internal development, organize training, help people to meet up the skills requirements. You could do internal coaching and mentoring, external support. You could use consultants. I mean, you can't arrive here without having done your skills audit. Okay, and some of the implementation of the skills audit might be what you have a consultant who works with you in HR department implement as well. So a simple HR audit that is being carried out beyond the skills audit is looking at the entire HR department. Anything that is lacking that you score a no, there needs to be an action plan to implement it. So, for example, in recruitment, when you recruit, do you have a job description for every position? This is a simple HR audit that covers everything in HR. Do you have every aspect of the HR function? Do you have a job description for each position? It's a no. And this is the result of the HR audit. Beyond the no, what's the next thing? We develop job description so that you meet certain standard. You step up to certain requirement, certain minimum standard or requirements. So the idea of the audit is to capture in real time what is absent, and trying to meet a certain standard. How do you step up to meet that standard? And that becomes the action plan or what needs to be done by way of next steps. So what are the opportunities in HR? HR administrator, if you like, is the entry, or HR assistant. You have HR officer, you have HR manager, you have HR director. These are opportunities depending on your experience. Training assistant, training officer, training manager, recruitment officer, recruitment consultant. You can work in payroll. You could work as administrative manager who has HR functions. You could work as a policy manager. You could work as an HR consultant. The opportunities are huge when it comes to HR consultant. So finally, we're talking about our training starting on the 31st of October, in which we cover all of this. We call it Introduction to HR Practice and Consulting. 13 weeks, 12, 13 weeks. We now have 16 modules, actually, 16 modules. And there's a module per week. Beyond the module per week, there are sessions for coaching and mentoring or tutorials. So if you have any questions, please take it up with your line manager and then they will escalate it. And that's for 13 weeks. And also, the sessions will be recorded. We had a lady asking us if the sessions were recorded. Yes, it will be recorded. And then at the end of it, there will be an assessment of competency. And once you pass your assessment of competency, will certify you that you're competent. That's the School of Consulting. We have very good reputation in terms of the people that we train. People learn from us. People learn to do, not what to do, but how to do. That's one of the great records that we have. And we don't just certify for the sake of certifying. You need to certify when we show that you're competent. So there's an assessment, and beyond that, there will be your certification. Okay, we'll give you lots of materials, lots of templates that you can access that will help you. At the end of the day, it's about helping you to become professional HR, whether working within an organization or working as a consultant. So those are the courses that we're looking at. How do you recruit and select? How do you develop HR policies and procedure? How do you put together a compensation and benefit plan? How do you structure, how do you implement performance management? How do you manage talent? How do you manage employees? HR administration. For HR consulting, we're going to focus a lot on HR intervention and HR strategy. The consulting aspect is about basically provide this same thing, but then from a strategic perspective. Strategic in the sense that looking at the future and then putting plans in place. Those plans in place could now be what is implemented in HR. So a lot of HR strategy that comes up is what is implemented in day-to-day HR. Like I said in the beginning, HR does not work in isolation. It devolves from the business goal. And most times the business goal can be what has been put together by a consultant or the HR director. And then the HR department implements the business goal. So that's what we're looking at. So at the end of this training, it can either be somebody that works in the HR department, or depending on your experience, you could start doing HR consulting. Okay. So the training format is every Tuesday, starting next Tuesday, and it's from 8 p.m. Every class will be recorded, so you can always go back to every class. It's going to be an online tutor that leads the training, so it's always interactive. Time for training, time for questions are always there, and for clarifications. And there are materials, there are slides, there are tools, there are templates that we give you that you can use. And then there's support from line facilitators. If there are questions, areas you're not very clear about, you can always contact your line facilitator and ask questions. We'll always get back to you. And that doesn't have to be in the class. It can be within the weeks. I mean, we do the training every Tuesday. So between each Tuesday, contact the facilitators. We will get back to you. And then for 13 weeks, every Tuesday, the training is attended online and training will be recorded. So the prices are there per module. There are prices per module. There are discounts for early bird, and there are discounts for full payment upfront. And of course, we have instrumental payments, which is over 3 months. Okay, so I think we've come to an end. last Monday, well, I'm doing this recording basically for someone who is interested. We didn't record it, so I had to do it all over again. So last Monday, 2 days ago now, today is Wednesday, we had again another free training on strategy tools, for development. Okay. All right. So we're going to end it here now, and we're going to end it now basically. So that's the free training on HR, which essentially looks at the different HR functions from recruiting right through to development, leadership development, or succession planning. And that's basically what we'll be looking at over in 13 weeks, the practical aspect of actually delivering on that. All right, thank you very much. My name is Shola Jani. Bye-bye.